Hi, my name is Anne McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Phelim and Anne show. No, it's not the Phelim and Anne show. It's the Anne and Phelim scoop. I was just thinking, yeah, we're married. It's great, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
Fabulous. So it's week 61. That's 1 year and 2 months and 1 week since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. Do you like the way I wrote that, Phelim?
Yes.
Yeah. And in this week's podcast, talking of the pandemic, we're going to interview our dear friend Justin Hart, the data nerd who has become famous through the pandemic for pointing out the madness.
The madness of the math.
The madness of the math. And we have a very disturbing update, by the way, from last week from our interview with Sohrab Ahmari about his book. You won't want to miss that.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon's up to its dirty tricks again.
And we have a question. Why did Hunter move to Venice, California?
Hunter Biden.
Why did Hunter Biden move to Venice, California?
And why won't he answer questions?
Indeed. And?
Your biggest fraud ever. Don't believe a word. If you've heard anything about the Steven Donziger Chevron case that's going on, it's not even Steven Donziger Chevron, it's Steven Donziger versus contempt of court. He's a fraudster. He's facing the consequences of his actions, and the left don't like it. So the media are circling the wagons. We'll tell you the truth. We'll break it down.
And the NYPD Blue, do you hear me saying that now? Of course, they're not at all the NYPD Blue of old. Yeah. The NYPD seems to have a massive problem with describing perps. And we think... In hate crimes. We think we might have an insight into that. We might be able to help them with that.
And when you lie about breast cancer, what wouldn't you lie about? Fracking liar Josh Fox is now moving on to lying about COVID and dealing with COVID liars.
And what about at movie houses, Phelim?
I believe they're dying. Should we care? They didn't care about us, and now they're reaping what they sow.
And in a very classic let them eat cake, we have a let them eat electric from the Biden White House.
And we're talking of electric. Is Elon Musk an idiot or a crook?
You've come to the right place here. And shocker news, Chrissy Teigen is not nice.
Yes.
You want to hear that. And the last thing we have, I know it sounds like a long list, the last thing we have is a magnificent recipe that I am incredibly excited to share with people. Very, very, very exciting recipe. And I'm very excited about that. And we have some mail in from a few of you, and we're going to respond to that at the very end of the show.
It's an anti-keto recipe, isn't it?
It's
not that we're opposed to keto.
That's right. It's an aggressively anti-keto recipe. Not that it's personal against Magda or anything like that, but it's very definitely for the anti-ketos among us.
Yes.
I just won't ever be a keto person. I just can't imagine a life without croissants.
Wow.
Or a life without sourdough bread. Or a life without bread in any form.
We know someone who's a vegan but eats croissants, don't we?
Yeah, but and we know that person. So we're going to go right now. We're going to go over right now because we just spoke, just before we came here, we just spoke a little earlier to Justin, and we're going to go over to that interview right now. Hi, everyone. So we're very lucky to be joined by our dear friend, Justin Hart, who is a data nerd and kind of an accidental... it's kind of funny. You look back on this in a decade, I think, Justin, because, you became the accidental COVID expert through this period. But we've been very lucky to have you as a voice of reason, looking at the data and analyzing the data through the pandemic. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you too. It was because of your efforts and other efforts that we got the word out about, the true nature behind what was happening here. And again, as I always say, I'm not a virologist, I'm not an epidemiologist, and typically I wouldn't insert myself into someone else's domain, but they sure seem to be inserting themselves into my life, my kids' education, my business, my church. And so I hope they'll forgive me if I check their math, because I did, and it's woefully inadequate. So that's kind of the starting point we have. And when you have public policy that affects you in such a dramatic way, it's every citizen's right to examine this and to voice their opinion in very specific ways. And if you can back it up with hard, cold facts and data like we do, all the better, I think.
Yeah, you've done a public service that we're very, very grateful for. I mean, we as you say, we chronicled a lot of this when we had our daily virus podcast, where we realized very early on that places like the New York Times was being super, super dishonest by reporting whole numbers rather than per capita numbers to make things look worse.
Or reporting per capita numbers to make things worse.
Yeah, they just switched it around, whichever made it worse. But I kind of wanted to open up by saying, as we start all of our podcasts by saying it's what we record what week it is. So this week, by the way, Justin, it is 61 weeks, 1 year and 2 months and 1 week since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. What's your big takeouts from this extraordinary 61 weeks we've gone through?
Well, it is extraordinary. And I remember on that fateful day, I think it was March 29th, that was the Rose Garden meeting with Dr. Birx, the presser there with President Trump, and of course, Vice President Pence, who really headed up a lot of this here and made a lot of those decisions, unfortunately. And that was the decision the day where they decided that they were going to extend that 14 days wait into what it is now, 60 plus weeks, right? On that day, I said two things happened. The federal requirements have extended and President Trump lost the election. I stand by that assertion because I believe that even if 1 or 2 or 3% of the demographic over 65 stayed home from the election, he would lose across the board. I've been very vocal as to some of the challenges that they've had in the election itself. And obviously our executive governors took preemptive issues to really expand that voting pocket there, doing away with a lot of checks and balances. But beyond that, it's been hugely impactful both on society and on our public policy. And unfortunately, we had to switch horses, which didn't help at all here in this last little bit. But we're at the end. I think we're at the end of this pandemic. It's now an endemic phase. In fact, there are some people making the case that we actually ended the pandemic at the end of the summer last year. And what we saw was basically over the winter and otherwise was a basically seasonal aspect of it where it shoved off influenza. I think over the course of that 2017-18 season where we had influenza, we had about 800,000 hospitalizations, which is about what we had over the season from weeks 39 to where we are in the week 16 and beyond. So it'll be really interesting as the data comes in and as we examine it. I think we will be vindicated.
I follow you obviously on Twitter, and I think, as I said, it's a public service. And by the way, just for everyone listening, just to remember again that you can follow Justin at Justin _Hart, _Hart, Hart. And I just want to quickly say, because I meant to mention this in the intro, that in Justin's intro, he's a father of 8. And I'm just saying, I just want to let you know, Justin, maybe I mentioned this to you before, get back to us when you're in the double digits, because my husband's from a family of 11. So we're just not that impressed, to be honest with you. So you recently tweeted, and it's from, I think, your website, which is called, is it called Rational Ground? Am I right?
Rationalground.com, yes.
Rationalground.com. Really amazing. You had a list, and I'm going to get you to tell me the list. You had an awful list. You said there at the end of the last question, you said, we'll wait till more data comes in. But you have some data right now, a terrible, very, very long list. Give us a little bit of that list of things we already know now about what was missed because everyone thought suddenly there was only one disease in the world.
It's a difficult thing. It's kind of butterflies and hurricanes, if you know the concept. A butterfly flaps its wing on one side of the world and a hurricane starts on the other because of it, right? And that's what happened with the lockdowns. They basically, and I'm not sure who designed that policy. We know that the two main comorbidities that exacerbate the issues for hospitalization and death for COVID-19 are obesity and lack of vitamin D. And so whoever came up with the policy to stick us inside eating takeout was really, really wrong. And so what we find from the data, and this happened early on in the spring in March and then April, is that oncologists, cancer doctors started seeing these numbers where they were having fewer diagnoses than they would typically have during that season. And people thought, oh, well, COVID must have cured cancer. No, that's not the case. People were frightfully scared of the disease. The pandemic, the lockdowns forced them into that mindset, and they didn't get diagnosed. And so now we're reaping the terrible, awful consequences of those decisions, where we're seeing stage 3 and stage 4 cancers being diagnosed very late in the game. That's being attributed. There was a Bloomberg article just yesterday about it. And so it's a dreadful consequence of that. We know that 50%, 46% of cancers went undiagnosed during that early part. In some cases, in some of these cancers, 78% of them went undiagnosed in the spring. We know that 50% of child immunizations were missed. I know this personally. I have a 2-year-old, and now, but over the course of the last year, they were on their immunization schedule, but it was not deemed necessarily a visit that you wanted to take. The doctor was basically shut down, and so we missed all those immunizations. And so if you're pro immunization on this was a terrible, dreadful thing, and it has consequences. In fact, the CDC on its website has, we know that many of you missed it. Here's a catch up, and then you have the real dire consequences, which are indisputable, which is the University of Michigan did a study where they identified that we probably missed, just in the spring of last year, 250,000 cases of alleged domestic child abuse. And why? Well, those are typically caught by sharp-eyed teachers and administrators, and kids weren't at school. And the list goes on. We have dreadful implications for supply chains and what that means for third world countries. You have devastation. One sociologist has done a study over the past few decades and found that for every uptick in unemployment that we see is basically 31,000 deaths over the next few years for that potential devastation. So it can be just a real challenging piece for that.
Yeah, and it's like funny. We not funny at all. We recorded last week in the podcast the awful information. Because everyone's talking about India and oh God, India. India has 450,000 people who die annually from tuberculosis, and that just, we'll just forget about that actually, because obviously COVID, 200,000 people have died of COVID in India, which is actually a very, very, very low number when it comes to, when you look at that from a per capita point of view. And all the immunizations in India and all over Africa, a lot of these immunizations, we've heard this, have been exactly as you said here, have been interrupted. The supply chain has been interrupted because of COVID. And I want to ask you more about your takeouts, but I mean, my biggest takeout about this thing has been just such a loss of faith in medical experts who are going on and on about one disease, like that everything has been cured. Every awful thing we worried about before was suddenly cured. They have no interest in anything else except for this one thing that we know affects a very, very specific population, and the rest of the people who get it have this massive recovery, massive success in recovery. But you had in your list, and you've given a few of those numbers: 46% of cancers undiagnosed, 50% of chemo treatments missed, 50% of infant immunizations glossed over, 250,000 cases, exactly as you said, of child abuse likely were missed, and 300,000 a 300,000% rise in cardiomyopathy.
Yeah, cardiomyopathy is known as broken heart disease. So it's they found that there was a 300% increase in ER visits for cardiomyopathy, which is when stress and real disorders come into play. And they saw that huge increase. And who could blame them? People freaking out about the virus and our public policy using fear as their main tactic and tool to keep people sort of in line. But in truth, it's devastating. I had a text from someone just north of me and south of you in Orange County. And they said, my 2 parents just passed away in the last 4 months. One from an undiagnosed blood glioblastoma, and the other one from another undiagnosed disease. They were elderly. They didn't die of COVID, but they died of those because they failed to get the medical treatment they wanted because they were so scared and so frightened to go out and get even medical treatment. And they said, he ended it. He says, my family is devastated. They will never be the same again.
Yeah, well, I think I think this is going to be one of the things that I've said this all the time. They'll talk about this for hundreds of years. Yeah. They'll talk about how badly we managed this for hundreds of years, and when I say how badly we managed it, how we unnecessarily terrorized people with this condition, with this COVID thing. But I wanted to kind of lighten things slightly for a moment, just for a moment, because there's been some amusing activity on social media and out on the streets, by the way, because of this lifting of the mask mandate. So the sudden lifting of the mask mandate by the CDC, first of all, happened awfully, like just like that. And I suppose you've been, on top of the data. Obviously, something dramatic happened in the data to make that happen, for the mask mandate to get lifted.
They're data driven.
Because they are so data driven. What exactly happened with the numbers?
They're data driven, but in this case, it was the poll numbers, right? They realized very quickly that they were in trouble with the public and that they were losing massive amounts of trust. We've known for a year that mask mandates on a mass scale really do not work. They're rather feckless. You and I both know, you look at the masks that people wear, no one has quite the attention or the effort that they need to do to wash masks or even the disposable ones. And so the cases there are just nullified. And we know, for example, that masks outdoors are completely unnecessary. And it's very specific settings that you might need a mask for. But we know when we look at counties that were masked versus counties that weren't masked, states that were masked versus states that weren't masked, there is zero difference between them. The case rate, the number of cases per population between Texas and Florida and California, all of them had different mask mandates. Florida's been basically free and clear for a few months and had no lockdowns for the past 6 or 7 months. They're within 10% of each other. So there's very little evidence to show that masks do anything except for creating huge divisions. But it is humorous to see that quick, sudden change in the science that just couples things over here. And hopefully we'll hear soon from our own governor, and he will start following the science. In fact, I've been encouraging people when they're outdoors to see people who are masked and ask them, why aren't you vaccinated yet? That's my tactic, at least. Little psyops.
Yeah. But just to twist that a little bit more, I wanted to bring to your attention, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, David Hogg, who is a student at Harvard. And I think we recognize that name from something, Phelim. Where do we recognize David Hogg's name from?
Well, he's an activist.
A survivor. Isn't he a survivor? So David Hogg, activist, anti-gun activist, I believe. David Hogg has written this on Twitter, which is tell you another use for a mask, by the way, that maybe not everyone has thought of. And David Hogg says, I feel the need to continue wearing my mask outside. Harvard student. That's me saying that. Even though I'm fully vaccinated, because the inconvenience of having to wear a mask is more than worth it to have people not think I'm a conservative. So, virtue signaler, is that what it means? Well,
no, that makes it sound like you think not being a conservative is a virtue. That's a sort of
I'm thinking about what he's thinking.
Yeah, well, as far as I can see, that's a vice signal.
Yeah. So basically, there's a use for a mask. And when I look around here where we are in Southern California, where you are, I think there's a lot of those David Hoggs around, because I see young people, really healthy young people, wearing this mask completely alone on the beach, like miles from anyone, jogging, wearing the mask, even now. And I'm thinking, what is that?
Yeah, we've basically broke America with this great psychological warfare here. It's really difficult. I think I retweeted in reply that David sounds like he needs a nap. Maybe someone can find him a pillow. But no, it's obviously a huge issue with the psychology of the country, and this is nothing new. Back in the real pandemic days, in the plague, 400 plus years ago in Milan, Italy, there were documented cases where there was a great fear that people outside the city were coming in to wash the walls, as they say, with infected fluids so that the virus would carry further throughout the city. And so they used to call it, they're anointing the walls. And so there was a great fear of anyone who was seen washing anything. An elderly man in church was seen brushing off his pew, and someone yelled from a distance, he's anointing the pew. He's anointing the pew. And they took him outside and beat him to death. Right. And so that's the division that happens when you create these very divisive, very constrictive, very unorganized sort of approaches to these things. And it is wholly unorganized. All sides of the aisle think the CDC has basically lost any credibility with its assertions there.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because it makes me also maybe make a connection here, a quick segue from the CDC and from Fauci and all of these guys. So Fauci was just asked, and you probably know this, he was just asked the other day, Senator Burr asked him, what percentage of his employees who would be more informed than the rest of us, right? What percentage of them are vaccinated? And Dr. Fauci said, just a little bit more than half.
How does he know that?
I don't know how he knows that. And
it's none of his business either.
But I'm kind of curious. I'm just curious to spitball this. Like, why aren't they getting vaccinated?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think what we find is that, attentive people realize, then balance their risks out. Over 85% of the population over the age of 65 has been vaccinated across the country. And it's a good portion of the people over 18 as well. But I think when people look at this, they go, look, my risk, the risks in a very basic term, and this has been the case for an entire year, proven and calculated out by John Ioannidis, the Stanford professor, the most cited living scientist alive, John Ioannidis. And he came out and said, the basic risk you can think of this way: if you're under the age of 65, your chances of dying of COVID are about the same chances of you dying on your commute to work. And if you're over the age of 65, they're slightly higher. It's the risk of dying on the road if you were a professional truck driver. And so you can picture those risks in your mind, because they have to do with time and they have to do with risk assessments and activities and everything else there. And in truth, if you're under the age of 45, your chances of dying are so slim. If you're a healthy woman under the age of 40, you have a better chance of dying in a plane crash than dying of COVID, right? Now, we know that this is a challenging disease, but even with the pharmaceutical interventions that we have now, the risks of being hospitalized with COVID are lower and lower each day. In fact, they're on par or lower than they are for influenza. The hospitalization rate for influenza is around 1 to 3%, and that's what it is for COVID right now. And so, even beyond the vaccines, the risks are so very low, and especially for children. And I think the problem is, the people who are in Dr. Fauci's organization know very well that this has been tested extensively. The vaccines has been tested on an enormous amount of people, but there's no cliff notes for the time factor that's involved, right? It took the FDA 5 years to approve ginkgo biloba, right? And now, we've had this vaccine for
slow down now. We're from Ireland.
Okay.
Ginkgo biloba?
Ginkgo biloba is it's a very popular supplement over here for brain cognition. You can get it over the counter at CVS. It's right there at any one of your pharmacies. It's like a vitamin D on steroids type of thing. It's got a lot of good stuff for it, for the brain. I take it on a regular basis. I love it. But it took it, and it's a very ancient sort of, I think, Chinese origin medicine from a ginkgo biloba root. But ginkgo biloba, it took them 5 years to approve that, right? But here we got an emergency use authorization for these vaccines, which is fine. If you're over the age of 65, I always say it's a no-brainer. Go ahead and take the vaccine. But if you're under the age of 65, and my wife, for example, is pregnant right now, due in August, she's not going to take it, right? We don't know what the effects are on this thing, because you cannot cheat the time factor for this piece to understand the impact on it. So I think that's why a good portion of Fauci's own staff is not vaccinated, because they understand that this thing takes a little time to get things out. I'm guessing every single person over the age of 50 or 65 there is probably vaccinated. But if you're younger, there's really little reason to take it right now.
I get that. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about as well is that you have this new initiative, which I think is genius, by the way. It's called COVID Stories Archive. Tell us, and I know it's I know you're at the beta stage and all of that. Tell us what the plan is. It's just brilliant. And we maybe, if we have your permission, could show the one story that you have right there, right now, as an example, if that worked for you. But
so I think COVIDstoriesArchive.org is a new initiative that is not directly affiliated with Rational Ground, but we love it. We know the people that are putting it together. They are accredited historians. And the idea is good, bad, or ugly. We want people to share what they experienced the pandemic. We believe for posterity's sake, that's vitally important. We think for academic research, it's crucial. And so we have a form that we fill out so we can get kind of, your general age, and we can get, they can get your zip code and kind of know geographically where you are. And all this can be, tagged as confidential or tagged as public use. And that way you can share, your story, your nightmare, or maybe your success. We've heard some love stories come from this, right? In fact, I got my next script for you guys for your next movie, which is San Francisco created this law, which basically, if you hooked up with someone, then you had to quarantine with them for 30 days or something.
Oh,
like that,
yes.
right? So imagine this great, rom-com where people two hook up and then they find out that the policy in San Francisco is they have to live with each other for 30 days now. Someone write the script for that. I think it'd be good.
It's one thing there, Justin. I mean, you think it'd be a rom-com. I think it sounds much more likely to me to end up being a bloodbath. But
it's a horror story.
I want to let's just take a moment here and watch. I want to take a moment here and watch this video from Justin Hart. And I think the lady's name is it Franca?
Yes.
Franca. This is an incredibly sad story. Once I listen to this, this is not unfortunately, this is not an unusual story. And we know it's not an unusual story. Let's just listen to this right now and have a watch this video.
Hi, I'm here to tell you my sister's story. Franca was 46 years old. She had Down syndrome and was nonverbal. She was hospitalized on March 28th with COVID symptoms, and she passed away on April 6th. Franca was denied any patient advocacy, even though we called constantly and asked the hospital if we can be with her. Franca died all alone and really did not understand what was happening to her. And I'm sharing this story because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. A person with a disability needs an advocate. It's a lot different than having a visitor. The day Franca died, we were told if we agreed to a DNR verbally that we would be allowed to see her. Well, we did, and we still were not allowed to see her. And there's a lot of discrepancies in her medical records with the time that she passed away. And I just want laws to be passed to protect people with disabilities.
Okay, so very, very sad, extremely sad. This situation is where, we've heard of loads of these. People who died alone because their relatives were not allowed to see them.
And in this situation, it's just equally so sad because of the mental state of this woman. And we have a full story on Rational Ground about her. You can see pictures up there of her as well. And it's just devastating. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to know that, we were so frightened and scared of this thing that we didn't consider, human experience and human responsibility to be part of this, right? Yeah. I mean, I feel it my responsibility to be there for my loved ones when they're at their passing stage. And I would hope that the Hippocratic Oath would extend to that, where they do no harm. Serious harm was done here. And I know that there are countless stories like that. And we hope that people, will come and share those at covidstoriesarchive.org, and really, extend this idea of capturing what people went through for posterity's sake. In the end, we hope that some academic research will adopt this so that they can become so that the de facto go-to place for this research information. And we're looking for stories, both good, bad, and indifferent. I know my story started very tragic, where I lost all my clients. My main client was golf excursions for baby boomers, across the world, dead, right? My next client was high-end college advisement for families, right? Dead, right? Our next one was a family vacation service, high-end vacation club, dead, right? So all three of my clients were dead within a month. And I had some free time. That's kind of how this started. And I said, this is an interest of me. Why did I lose all my clients? This makes no sense. Let's figure this out. And that's kind of how the ball started rolling. So it's been, obviously a hugely painful experience, but also given a lot of people purpose too. So I hope that people find some initiative to go there.
We'll put up on the screen a kind of whatever the URL is of where people can contact you with their stories.
Well, they can go to covidstoriesarchive.org is the website there. And there's a form to fill out. You can fill it. If you have a video, if you want to videotape yourself, you can upload that. If you have a YouTube already, you can link to that as well. So we're hoping to really capture that. And then, I hope with, in the future, as we find stories that are really worth preserving, that we'll send like a, professional crew out there to this person to really capture that appropriately and grab the, the moment. So,
yeah, I mean, by the way, those stories are everywhere. I mean, you yourself have a story about, the very sad loss of your baby when you had the miscarriage and your wife had to go alone when normally you'd always have been there with her, and that there she was alone at this awfully difficult time. That is an awful story in itself. I have a very dear friend of ours whose daughter, a grown-up daughter who's like 20, got a diagnosis with cancer and had to actually have like emergency surgery. And the mom and the girl has some depression issues and stuff like that. The mom had to drive her and sit in the car, couldn't go into the hospital, had to leave this young lady off at the hospital alone, somebody who was very stressed and depressed anyway, with this really, disturbing diagnosis. And the mom is in the car, listening to some religious music to try and, so those stories, I mean, this is only ones that I'm kind of the ones that are off the top of my head. But I mean, we know so many of these stories, and it's unnecessary. All of it was unnecessary.
Yeah. That's the sad thing, is that when it comes down to it, and you look at states that lock down dramatically, like California or even New York, and you look at others who locked down for maybe a month or so, like Florida, and then who relieved things like Georgia or Texas, and you realize that there was very little difference between any of it. And in fact, there's a good case made that the lockdown states fared worse because of the draconian the shutdowns there. And I think we're going to learn a lot from this. I would say that, if this is something that hopefully we don't have to go through again.
Are we going to learn?
Well, that's a tough thing. I remember this headline out of the Santa Barbara newspaper, and it was "Masks are the chief ally of the flu," right? And it went on and it described how people don't keep these masks well and how it really infects them. Well, I should note, that's an article from 1918 in the Santa Barbara newspaper there after that pandemic, because they were very keen on masks and they quickly realized that wasn't the case. For some reason, we lost that knowledge and we repeated history that way. So hopefully, and that's one of the goals that we have at rationalground.com as we exit the pandemic, is to make sure that something like this never happens again. You can see Governor DeSantis, who is doing, I think, the right thing and creating a great template for other states, where he, for example, puts very specific restrictions on what local counties can do to put mask mandates on things. So, for example, if a county chooses to roll back and somehow put stringent demands on its citizenry, those are only good for 7 days, and then they have to go to a regional approval. So I think there are some very good checks and balances that need to happen. We're working with offices on Capitol Hill to make sure that COVID passports never come and materialize there. About 6 or 7 states have already passed legislation denying that. So I think we're trying to put some protections in place for the Americans to preserve their rights.
Well, listen, we've come to the end of this interview, but I mean, we could talk to you forever. Just, I mean, I think it's a real public service. Rationalground.com and COVID Stories Archive and COVIDstoriesarchive.com. I mean,
.org.
The only hope .org.
Okay.
COVIDstoriesarchive.org. The only hope for things not happening like this ever again is efforts like what Justin is doing, where there'll be, I think you're going to be overwhelmed, by the way, on the COVID Stories Archive. And I think you're doing it in a similar way to the Holocaust Memorial, where people, recorded what happened. And I think it'll be an incredible tool for posterity, because we have to learn from this. I mean, I kind of make a joke about I'm going to be prepared for the next pandemic, but I mean, and one of the things we forget, by the way, Justin, I'm sure you're very aware of this, is we're actually very lucky to be in America, because Europe is people have been imprisoned, like really imprisoned. Australia is a disaster. I think Canada, really, really awful. The Canadian border is still closed down, right? Lucky the border though down with Mexico though, no problems there, right?
Right.
South of the border. No problem.
Great. Well, thank you guys for all your support and all your making this available there. And I'm so glad to be with you today.
Tell us again, Justin, the name of your website.
Sure. Yeah. So the website we have, it's covidstoriesarchive.org. That's where you'll be able to input your stories about your experience during the pandemic and the lockdowns. And of course, you can find me online, Twitter at Justin_Hart, and all of our articles and all of our research is at rationalground.com.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Well, that was great.
Yes, that's Justin. We could have talked for a long time, actually. He's very interesting and a real voice of sanity in the madness.
Yeah, we're really happy by that.
So we have a big Ahmari. Remember last week we interviewed Sohrab Ahmari about his book, Unbroken Thread, Discovering the Wisdom of Tradition in an Age of Chaos. And it's exactly what it says in him. It's saying, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And actually, the throwing out of the tradition and rules of our lives has made people less happy rather than more happy. So-called freedom that they think they have, has not made them happy. So we interviewed Sohrab last week. It was a brilliant interview. We had an enormous reaction to it.
Yeah.
I mean, people really, really loved the interview and really went to buy the book. So then, what happened over the weekend, Dan?
So over the weekend, I was on Twitter and I discovered that basically, and I started seeing Sohrab tweeting, and I wrote to him to get clarification. So basically Amazon had deplatformed him, ghosted him. So when you went, and people who had listened to our show, we had said to them, go and buy the book. And a lot of people, by the way, still to this day, people are still going on Amazon because it's like the place they're used to. They go, they put in the name, they just, because maybe it's hard to spell his name. So they put in The Unbroken Thread, can't find it. You can see here's the screen grab. We put in Sohrab Ahmari, Unbroken Thread. What comes up? Finding My Way Home, A Journey to Discover Hope and Life of Purpose, whatever.
By John Huston. So nothing, all these other tools
things.
And all these other things.
And then we put it in again, and actually somebody else put this in and found a book analysing his book.
Yes.
Came up.
We had that too.
Yeah.
That is somebody ripping off the book. So somebody puts it through a translation app and then retranslates it back into English.
Exactly. And then Sohrab himself then, and here's a tweet from him and you can see it. This is all over the weekend. I just found that with a simple author search, now I'm leaning back towards the malice theory.
So he put in a simple with a simple author search and got On Juneteenth, which is a Black Lives Matter book.
Yeah.
And he's saying when it takes him there, he realizes this is not accident, this is malice.
So somebody had literally done this. Now I think we looked this morning and it's fixed this morning.
Yes, after an outcry
over the weekend. Yeah. But I would ask people to buy that. We are going to put up a link in the show notes on YouTube and also on the wherever you're getting the podcast. We'll see that. We'll have a link from the publisher of the book. And it'll give you all the places to buy the book. I would recommend buying the book anywhere but Amazon, by the way, given what they've just done over the weekend. Yes. And if you are somewhere where there's bookstores that are open, go in there and buy a hard copy. And by the way, let us know what you think of the book when you've had a chance to read it. We really highly recommend it. It really is a wonderful book at a perfect time in history when we're living in chaos, to look at the Unbroken Thread, and there's some incredible stories, incredible inspiration there. So that's another little very disturbing update basically from Amazon.
Yeah. As you know, we're making the movie about Hunter Biden, mysonhunter.com, and I'm just tired of Hunter Biden giving softball interviews and not being asked difficult questions by intelligent journalists who want answers to really important stories. And and pretending that his confessional memoir is a confession of the truth. It's not. So I am going to ask him these questions. And actually, I went over there the other day. He lives just around the corner from us. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. And there's real questions to ask him. So let's look at my little report that I did. And I actually got Hunter to come out, and let's see how he reacted to some difficult questions. And then I decided, it's time that the world knew these questions. So let's see that clip.
Hunter.
Is Mr. Biden there? Are you there? Oh, hi, Hunter. We have some questions here for you on a truck. Is that your signature, Hunter? Is that your signature? Hunter, is that your signature? My name is Phelan McAleer. I'm a journalist and filmmaker from mysonhunter.com. We're here to ask Hunter Biden the questions that journalism and journalists haven't asked him so far. Like, for example, did you lie on your gun background check? People need to know, and why aren't you being charged if you did? Why did Burisma pay you, a self-admitted addict, $80,000 a month? What did they get for that? Hunter, again, talking about your father, we wanted to ask you, is this the big guy? You said in an email, cut the big guy in for 10%. Is Joe Biden the big guy? Your business partner says he is. Simple yes or no answer. American people need to know the truth about Burisma, about why he was hired, about who is the big guy. So let's go and see if he will answer some questions. Thanks. Hi.
How can we help you?
Yeah, we're looking to ask Mr. Biden some questions. I'm a journalist.
Okay.
And we have some questions on a truck there for him as well. We're journalists.
Hi, sir.
Is Mr. Biden there? You there?
Doorbell was pressed.
Oh, hi, Hunter. We have some questions here for you on a truck. Is that your signature, Hunter? Is that your signature? Why did he run? Hunter, why did you run back? Hunter, you're publicizing a book. Would you like to come out and answer some questions? Hunter?
Private road.
He's a public figure. He's publicizing a book. So,
Not right now.
well, he is actually. He gave interviews. Hunter, you ran back in there.
He obviously went inside, so he doesn't want company at this time.
Hunter, who is the big guy? Is Joe Biden the big guy? Hunter, did you lie on your gun application form? Hunter, we have the questions here. If you can see them on the side of the truck. So there you go. You saw the reaction. Santa Monica in Venice. They want journalists to ask questions. Who's the big guy? Where'd the 10% go? Did Hunter Biden lie? Is that his laptop? Simple questions that need to be really asked. And that's what we're going to do with our movie, My Son Hunter. That's why we're making it, to get the truth out to millions of people. So please go and give what you can. Help us make the movie, mysonhunter.com. We're crowdfunding it because this story has been suppressed by big media, big tech, big Hollywood. So you can help make it happen at mysonhunter.com. Thank you. Bye.
So he ran away, hiding Hunter Biden. He ran away. And by the way, these are not difficult questions, and they are difficult questions actually, because there's no answer to them.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
This is why we're making the movie, because most Americans don't know about these questions, don't know about these facts, have never heard anyone ask those questions, have never heard anyone mention those questions. So this is why we're making the movie, and this is why we still need your help. Go to mysonhunter.com, give what you can. We're crowdfunding it because big tech, big media, and big Hollywood are suppressing this story, and that's why we're going to get it out there. And it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's going to be very serious and tell the truth. So thank you for your help. mysonhunter.com.
And in a kind of a related, story, I mean, why is he living here? Like, this is a question we're trying to, in Venice. Why has he chosen, of all the places on the planet Earth, by the way, to live in? And let's say, all right, COVID and all that, then he'd have to be restricted to the United States of America. That's a large territory. Why has he come to Venice? And, I just thought I'd bring you, to give you an idea of, to give you an idea of the neighborhood we're in here. He's got this new child of his fifth child, even though he only counts 4 children. This is the neighborhood he's decided to live in, and this is from the police talking at a meeting locally here in Venice recently.
Venice Neighborhood Council.
The Venice Neighborhood Council, with the cops updating the local Venice Council on the security situation here. Let's listen to this.
So to members of the committee, we certainly appreciate whatever help that we can get, because right now our traditional law enforcement model is not working. The crime stats are through the roof. And if you'd like me to start off with the crime stats so we all understand what our playing field is right now. So as of May 1st, I'll start with violent crime robberies in Venice. This is both Monique Contreras' car and Adrian Acosta's car. Robberies are up 177%. Assaults with a deadly weapon are up 116%. And if we focus down to those same crimes involving only persons experiencing homelessness, robberies are up 180%, and aggravated assaults are up 162%. If you look at property crimes, burglaries in your neighborhoods, in the Venice neighborhoods, are up 85%. Grand theft autos are up 57%, and theft from vehicles are up 16%. And this is despite the LAPD going out and doing more enforcement than any time in the near future. Our citations, LAPD officers have written 109% more citations than the same time last year. As far as beach enforcement, LAMC 6344, we have written 590% more citations. Felony arrests are up 68%, misdemeanor arrests are up 382%. So that being said, law enforcement only model approach is not working right now. We're doing a lot of enforcement, and part of it has to do with the zero bail situation where our arrests are way up. We're arresting people and they're immediately getting released before the officers are even done writing the reports.
Right?
Yeah.
So Hunter Biden has chosen to live in this neighborhood when the whole country's full of peaceful neighborhoods.
Yeah.
What's he doing here? What specifically about Venice is attractive? And I have to say, given the guy's history of being a chronic drug addict, chronic alcoholic for most of his adult life, almost all of his adult life, this is really an odd choice.
Yeah.
And one has to ask, what's going on?
The thing is, if you wanted to live in LA, there are places you could live. You could live in remote Malibu, by the way, which would be a great place to recover from.
Totally.
You could live in Brentwood or Westwood, which is more suburban and family oriented. I don't know. I mean, I think he's just a player still. I think he has not taken this sobriety seriously. I think also his wife, a lot of British people, she's South African, but from that British, European, Australian, South African, a lot of them when they come here, they all want to live in Santa Monica or Venice. We lived in Venice when we first came, Marina Del Rey, and we still live in Venice. So there is this thing, and I think she's leading that. But she's a special person. According to his memoir, she cured him from instantly from crack addiction. He said, "I have a confession. I'm a crack addict." She goes, that's over now.
I know that she should sell that on, because I mean, if she has that gift. I mean, there's people who'd spend a lot of money if they could be instantly cured of alcoholism and drug addiction.
As we know, you can be cured of drug addiction through CVS holistic remedies.
Go on.
Remember, we covered the Harvey Weinstein trial. So Annabella Sciorra, you remember the evidence? She said she was raped by Harvey Weinstein, and the facts were let's just say they were vague, to say that she couldn't remember which year it was. But anyway, she was so badly traumatized, she became a drug addict, addicted to pills. But she managed to kick it through after using over-the-counter holistic remedies she bought in CVS. So,
and by the way, before we just leave this Venice section of the show, I mean, I'm looking at these numbers and just look back at them. Robberies are up 177%. Assault with a deadly weapon is up 116%. Burglaries are up 85%. Grand theft auto is up 57%. Specifically involved unhoused, whatever. Anyway, aggravated assaults up 162%. All misdemeanor arrests. So misdemeanor arrests are up 382%. But the thing at the end of that report from the cops that I think is really significant is what they said about the fact that by the time, before the cop has finished writing up the citation, the guy has got off already. They're released. The suspects are released because of the no cash bail or whatever, no bail. The bail laws that they have now. So my question is not just, why is Hunter Biden living here? Why are we living here, Phelim?
Oh, domestic. Magda is laughing a little bit too heartily there in the
little bit of tension on the set there.
Yes.
Okay, Phelim, tell us about the next story we're talking about now.
No.
Don't bang on the table.
Why are we living here, Anne? Because of our cats.
Because the cats, and we're near the beach, and it's
no,
very
the cats.
nice.
The
air is very
The cats
nice.
have got friends here.
My mother used to say about the air. My mother used to say about the air, because we lived at the Atlantic Ocean in Ireland. My mother used to say the air is like champagne. And you know what? She's right. The air is very, very nice down at the beach. Yes. Except for, by the way, I would say the air yesterday on the beach was not great, because there was a fire
in the Palisades.
In the Palisades, in the Pacific Palisades. And what happened? How did that fire start, Phil?
Climate change.
No, that fire was started by a homeless arsonist.
Oh yeah.
So the
percentage of crime in Pacific Palisades is up a few percent as well.
So we have a little bit of a problem with homelessness.
So you might be following the current Steven Donziger trial in New York. It's got a lot of publicity in a lot of leftist and more mainstream outlets. And basically, he's been accused of contempt of court, and he's been under house arrest, and it's the persecution of a brave environmentalist lawyer who tried to take on a company, and now they're grinding him into the ground. It's all that is a complete nonsense interpretation of what's happening. Steven Donziger perpetrated one of the largest civil frauds in the history of the planet. I think Bernie Madoff was the only person who got away with more. At least they got the money back from Bernie Madoff. But so Donziger led a group of plaintiffs against Chevron, and claiming they polluted the rainforest in Ecuador, and managed to get either an $18 or a $19 billion award. It depends on your currency exchange at the moment. That award was basically a part of a massive criminal conspiracy, an enterprise. I mean, it was so massive and it was such a conspiracy that he was actually prosecuted under civil RICO regulations in New York and was found guilty. I mean, it's a great story actually, and we did a play about it called the $18 billion Prize, played up in San Francisco, used massive amounts of the actual verbatim court testimony. Here's just some of the things that Donziger did. I mean, how he was caught was wonderfully funny actually. He commissioned an independent documentary, and the people funding the lawsuit paid for the documentary.
Fabulous.
And it was nobody knew that. It was supposed to be independent at the time. Joe Berlinger did it and was being secretly funded by the plaintiffs, the lawsuit people. And he got caught when it premiered at Sundance. They went into a panic because there was a scene that showed him in communications with the judge, and if that got out, they would know that he's not supposed to. Obviously, he's not supposed to be in communication with the judge. He's supposed to be independent. So he wrote to Berlinger and got Berlinger to re-edit the film, and the film was re-edited, and a new version came out, and Chevron's lawyers noticed the difference and realized he had control of the documentary. So then they were able to seize the 500 hours of outtakes from the film, and obviously the documentary filmmaker protested under First Amendment journalism rules, and the judge then said, look, you're being paid by these people taking a lawsuit. This is not a work of journalism.
Yeah.
This is a work of advocacy.
Yeah.
This is part of the lawsuit.
Propaganda.
So therefore, it's all discoverable. Yeah, he was going to openly boasting about how corrupt the Ecuador judicial system was and how he was going to intimidate the judge, because that's the only language this judge is going to understand, is one of pressure, intimidation and humiliation.
He said, in
Donziger said this. And then the Donziger was also caught saying that they were sort of really upset that the pollution hadn't spread from the original drilling sites.
Right now, all the reports are saying nothing has spread anywhere at all.
Yes, and this lack of pollution is a real problem, right? And no, these are people who claim this is the Amazonian Chernobyl, and it's all these little localized bits of oil. And also another thing is a lot of this was Chevron pulled out in the 90s, Texaco pulled out in the 90s, and so it was the state-owned company that was drilling after this. So even the localized pollution that's there, and by the way, it's not necessarily localized pollution. There's plenty of oil on Venice Beach at the moment. It pops up naturally every day. It doesn't harm anyone, except it gets on your shoes when you walk on the beach and you come back to the house. I mean, then there was also footage of Donziger sort of wanting to brazen it out. And here's a quote from him: "We take our existing water evidence on groundwater contamination, extrapolate based on nothing other than our theory, then we can do it and we can get money for it." So based on extrapolate...
If we take our existing evidence on groundwater contamination, extrapolate based on nothing other than our theory,
yes,
then we can do it and we can get money for it.
Yeah, no, and there's more. Like he actually, he got the he forged signatures of experts. Of geological and pollution experts. He actually forged this. So they were presented with reports in court saying, "Is this your signature?" And he goes, "No, I never signed that. That's not my signature."
Oh my God.
And then he also paid the court's independent expert $250,000 so they could ghostwrite his findings that recommended the massive damages. And then they also showed evidence that he bribed the judge $500,000 to write and he ghost wrote his own judgment.
Nice.
So this is the guy that the left is hailing as a hero. And what's happened then was, because the original judgment, the $18 billion, was got under fraud, the judge in New York says, you are forbidden from trying to chase this up. You're forbidden from raising money to fund yourself to chase this up. He ignored this, and the judge said, I want to find out just how much you've been raising, because it has to go into a fund. I need all your electronic equipment. And he said no. So he's refusing to.
So he's in contempt.
He's in contempt, and that's what he's been charged with. Nothing else. Contempt of court. He can purge that contempt by handing. And by the way, I wouldn't like to hand my phone over, but there's a whole procedure now where you hand it over, and an independent master of the court looks at your phone and makes sure that private stuff or private privileged stuff does not go over to the other side. So this is, it's worse. He basically frightened the people of Ecuador, of the rainforest, telling them they're all dying of cancer, and they're not.
That's terrible.
There's one great exchange, actually, I remember, where he got really upset because the Ecuadorian government were cleaning up some sites, and they cleaned up one site and it cost something like $100,000. And he was going, we got to stop this. We got to stop this.
This is far too efficient.
Also, we don't want them to clean it up because we need the evidence of. We want to say, look at this dirt, and if it's only $100,000, that knocks back our claim for damages. So don't believe anything you read about Donziger. He has been deeply unethical and has been convicted of RICO. They used the RICO statute. So he's been involved in conspiracy to bribe judges, to misrepresent, and has committed fraud. So no sympathy there.
So this is an odd story from the NYPD, and it's, do you know what it reminds me of, Phil? It reminds me of when we moved to California first, and we used to go to this coffee shop over there on Washington Boulevard. Do you remember that? Yeah. And we witnessed a guy steal a bicycle, right? We saw it. So we saw a couple of guys, cool guys coming in. They're super expensive bicycles. We saw them, right? And they were just rushing in to get the coffee, and the coffee thing, the doors were open and all that. So it's they were right beside the bicycles. They ran in, and instead of locking up the bikes, they for a second they left them. And this guy came out of nowhere and grabbed one of the bikes and took off cycling really fast, right? And we're everyone saw it. Everyone at the coffee shop saw it. Anyway, flash forward, the cops came, all this kind of thing. So everyone around the place, right? And Phil, we're describing the perp, right? Everyone was describing the perp. And Phil and I are sort of sitting there, and we don't need to describe the perp because everyone saw him. So it's like everyone is giving their, very good descriptions. And here's what the descriptions sound like. Very new red Nike high tops, skinny jeans, cut tight, rather worn on the side leg, a larger blouson top with, and it's an unbelievable detail, right? And a hat. He's got a hat with the thing, and it's like, and we're sort of sitting there, and I'm listening, and I'm literally, it's almost like you're in a comic routine, because you're thinking, excuse me now, there's something you're not mentioning here, right? The guy was black, and all the people who were describing him left that out. And you know what I mean? It's the same thing as saying, what's the first thing you notice about a person? Their colour, if they're very fat. By the way, no, if he was very fat, you'd say it.
But Marina Del Rey is a very white place, right? So if you a black guy on a bicycle running off,
you'll find him really fast, right? So flash forward. So we were very shocked at that and thought, well, this is hilarious. This is the world we're living in now. So flash forward to now, and the NYPD Hate Crimes Unit, who, by the way, are tracing and tracking crimes against Asians, and it's a big deal, of course, and all that. Apparently, it's a big deal, right? Okay, apparently,
it is a big deal, whether it's a big problem. I'm treating it just the way that they're treating it. Here's the screen grab of a recent tweet that they put out. You can see the body of the person, but you can't see their face until you click on the image. And basically, it says, April 19th at approximately 4:15 p.m., an Asian female, 50, was on a southbound D train when an individual approached her and said, "Get off my train, you don't belong here," and then slapped her in the back of her head with an open hand. Any info, right? Go to NYPD tips, and there's a telephone number. But what they fail to do is to mention the very obvious, that the individual is a young woman, a young black woman. And by the way, why don't you say that? Now, in fairness to them, at least they put a photograph up. But the fact that
you know,
you can't see it when you see the tweet. You don't see that. You just see the body of the person. You don't
Yeah,
see,
you have to click on it.
The photo is perfectly cropped, bizarrely. Imperfectly cropped, actually, not to show the face on the tweet. So you actually have to click on the tweet.
Before you get to see the full, before you get to see that the woman is, and it's a young, you know, when an individual, no, it's not an individual, it is a young woman. So it's a young black woman.
Basically, the long and short of it is, there is no, I don't know if there is, funny, there might be an anti-Asian movement among African Americans at the moment, but they're certainly not in the general population, and what people are not saying is most of these attacks on Asians in New York and other places, it seems to be a lot of the perpetrators are African Americans. And I wonder, is all this publicity about attacks on Asians encouraging other people to attack Asians? I mean, or is it just that everyone's reporting it now, maybe it all will on, and maybe there's no increase at all. And by the way, these people are crazy anyway. I don't think they care what race the person is.
The person who attacks somebody on a train.
Yeah. Anyone who attacks anyone on a train
is a crazy person.
Is a crazy person. Yes. Probably doesn't care that much about the race of the person they're attacking.
Well, anyway, I think if you're going to describe the race of the person who was attacked, I think the perp's race maybe should be mentioned as well. You know, if you're going to do those descriptions. Okay, tell me about our old friend, Phelan, Josh Fox.
Josh Fox, don't you love Josh? Yeah, so Josh Fox, director of Gasland, you know, have more lies in 90 minutes than most of Joe Biden's speeches. Boom, boom. So you remember Josh? I mean, he just lied. He lied about lighting your water on fire through fracking. He lied about fracking causing breast cancer. He lied so badly about it, he got such a reaction to it. He made a short movie about it. Then he made another movie about fracking where he forgot to put in the bit that it causes breast cancer. And I'm going, well, either it causes breast cancer, and if it does, it should be the lead story in your new documentary. If you've decided it doesn't, and it doesn't stand up, then you
should do a mea culpa.
You should withdraw your previous movie. He didn't do either, so he allowed one lie to stand, but didn't include it in his HBO documentary. Anyway, he is now making a new movie, apparently about COVID.
A documentary, right?
A documentary, and he's interviewing Rebecca Jones.
There's a name we've heard before.
She's the whistleblower from the Department of Health in Florida.
Alleged whistleblower.
Well, sorry, if you're listening on the podcast, I'm doing air quotes here, whistleblower. So basically, there's a wonderful article about her in National Review. She is a fraudster. There's nothing else to call her. She's a fraudster.
Yeah, a lot of people will remember this story. So basically, you know, as you know, for background, you'll remember that obviously the numbers in Florida are fantastic. So basically, in a place,
or certainly not unusual.
No, well, that's exactly the problem, Phil. Yeah. They're very unusual. The numbers in Florida are very unusual because the number of people who have died there, per capita, is half of what people have died per capita in New York.
Despite Florida
being open for business and everyone out and about and people drinking pints and carousing and all of this business, right? So the numbers are embarrassing for those who are the lockdown zealots. Very embarrassing. So of course the lockdown zealots have to find a way of explaining this.
So Rebecca Jones has come forward and she is claiming that she was told to massage the figures on the website and to make Florida look better than it is. And Charles Cook has done a wonderful piece in National Review, and he's basically saying it's not true, it's nonsense. She isn't a martyr, she's a myth peddler, she isn't a scientist, she's a fabulist, she's not a whistleblower, she's a good old-fashioned confidence trickster.
Nice.
She had no, and she's making hundreds of thousands on GoFundMe. She has been charged with crimes in about 3 states, actual crimes: assault on a police officer, blackmailing a boyfriend, posting private pictures, stalking, cyber stalking.
Oh my God!
She had no involvement in the figures. She actually administered the website rather than inputted data. You know, she transferred someone's data into the website because she managed the website, but she had no role in setting up the figures or massaging or reporting the figures at all.
That is amazing.
I mean, she is an out and out liar, and she was fired. And then she stole a load of data and started putting it online, I believe. And then basically they were worried that this data contained personal information that should not be posted. So because she stole the data, they got a warrant from a Democrat judge to go and search her property. And they got there, and then she then claimed that the cops held guns to her head and terrorized her children. She forgot that cops in Florida have cameras on their bodies, and when they released the footage, there was none of this at all.
Oh my God! So she's just a liar and a
Complete
fraudster
lie.
and as you
complete.
say, a fabulist.
A fabulous.
And who wrote this article in
Charles Cook in the National Review.
Highly
And,
recommend that. We'll put that in the show notes
yes,
as well.
Yeah. So I mean, it's fair. I mean, even some Democrats have been attacking Josh Fox for interviewing her, and he's just saying, oh, you know, he's going, oh, it's good to be two troublemakers, you know, making trouble, and it's like two liars lying.
Yep.
So
yep.
I'll let's keep an eye on Mr. Fox.
So the other story that caught our eye, and we just want to mention kind of briefly though, but is this fact that movie houses are dying, and as you've probably known, they're all going out of business. Which one? ArcLight, was it ArcLight, or which one is it? That one that we really liked, by the way, have closed and shuttered for good. So you know, should we care? And I think we feel like
Well, it's very funny. So Hollywood has spent about the last 50 years attacking conservatives through their content, through their donations, through their awards, through their speeches. Firing conservatives, attacking. I mean, just and in the movies, just in a movie. Remember that movie Julie and Julia, you know, which is about cooking, having 2 or 3 attacks on conservatives and Republicans in a cooking show, and this is just
cooking movie.
This is just part of the course. Every excuse, every award show, but even in mainstream media movies, they just throw in random attacks on the middle of America because that's how nasty and mean they are. So they've alienated conservatives, and conservatives won't go to the movies now, pretty much.
Shocker.
Yeah. So what happens then? You have a pandemic where they close the theaters, and the people who want to go out to bars, and the people who want to go out to restaurants, and the people who want to go somewhere where you don't wear masks, and the people who are conservatives, the people who are still frightened of their own shadows, are liberals. So basically, they've opened theaters.
And no one's going.
And the people who would go have been so alienated by you for the last 50 years. So I think is there some kind of German word for pandemic Schadenfreude?
Oh, that's right. That's a classic Schadenfreude right there,
yes,
isn't it?
Pandemic Schadenfreude.
I'm sure the Germans have a word for it. That is,
yes.
A word, you know. That
I mean, and by the way, Hollywood, if you had treated conservatives with respect now, you wouldn't have the same problem.
No, because you'd open the theatres and the place would be packed.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I hadn't thought about that. That's very good.
Yeah.
So, and let them eat electric. This is a great story here.
So Jennifer Granholm, who is the former governor of Michigan, remember there was gas lines a week or so ago. Actually, probably there's still some gas lines because of the shutting down of the Centennial Pipeline. She was asked about that at a press conference. Let's hear her wonderfully empathetic.
Let's hear her, and for those of you watching, let's look at the face of this woman. Look at her empathy here for people who are caught because they can't get petrol for their cars.
Yes.
If you drive an electric car, this would not be affecting you, clearly.
That's the White House. That's the Biden White House.
Smug face.
Yes.
God help us.
By the way, so somebody should tell her that if you owned an electric car in Texas when the grid went down, you couldn't travel anywhere. And if you could charge your car, it was $700 a charge because the price of electricity went up. This is the problem with electricity-only states and electricity-only energy, is that when electricity goes down, everything stops.
What a deeply unpleasant person, by the way. What a deeply, deeply unpleasant person with her smug, laughing face in the face of in a situation where people were in these awful situations where they couldn't get to work, they couldn't get to the hospital, they couldn't get to see, you couldn't do anything because they couldn't get petrol.
Elon Musk.
Or God. Oh, you're going to mention Elon Musk. Yes. Tell me about Elon Musk then. What's happened to him?
So Elon, a few months ago, said, I'm buying 1.5 billion of Bitcoin, and we're going to accept Bitcoin for Teslas, and Bitcoin is the new way ahead, and Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin went through the roof.
Yes.
Now, for other reasons as well. But by the way, Elon Musk
has
the power to move a lot of markets.
Yeah.
And he announced, and by the way, I've known for a long time that it takes a lot of energy to mine Bitcoin. And I know some people who allege that they are Bitcoin multi-millionaires, and you're using the money to mine more Bitcoin.
Well, he would know, by the way, because he's really smart. He would know very well about
it. Takes an enormous energy to mine Bitcoin. But now, after pumping the share price, he has now announced he's dumping the shares.
Because
because it costs so much energy and takes so much energy. It's
He's
bad
only
for
just discovered that
it's
now.
bad for the planet and bad for the environment. And I use those words, pump them and dump them, because this
Is that a
sounds-
phrase? Is that a phrase? Pump
Yes,
and dump?
Pump and dump. It's what Tony Soprano does.
Is it illegal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. No, yes, it is. It is illegal. Yes. It's a grey area. Let's just say I think the SEC should be involved here because he uses his.
And as you
outside-
said, as you were saying earlier, he needs money, right? So
Yeah.
he's just got a.
He's a cash crunch. I mean, he's not selling as many Teslas as he'd like, and it's a big drain on cash. So, but then now, and Tesla's doing well at the moment, but it's all cash is always a problem, and I don't know. It's I do not buy. Oh my God! I just realized that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. We all knew that. So there's something else going on there. So Chrissy Teigen.
Teigen? I don't know how to say it.
Teigen. I just want to say I never,
Phil has never liked her.
not never like, I knew that she was a nasty piece of work.
It's
I
very
knew
funny.
it.
He had an instinctive thing about her. He wasn't fond of her now.
Yes, I just knew that is a nasty piece of work, and I wasn't following her on Twitter, and I wasn't particularly, but I for some reason I seem to have been on an Instagram, following her on Instagram, and there was just something deeply fake and deeply disturbing about her niceness, right? So anyway, it turns out that she's not nice.
Really not nice.
And she basically, 10 years ago, told a 16-year-old, Courtney Stodden, who was going through a very, very difficult time at the time and was probably being abused by a 50-year-old man, in public told her to take a dirt nap, which is slang for die and be buried in the ground. And then, just in case she missed that, wrote to her on a DM, on a private message, that she hoped she died. This is a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, I hope I wake up. Something about I hope I wake up in the morning and you don't exist or something.
Yes. So this is a 16-year-old girl. She told a 16-year-old girl who was obviously going through serious mental health problems and serious abuse issues. So that is Chrissy Teigen. I mean, there's all this nonsense out there about her losing her Target sponsorship. She didn't. The Target, unfortunately, had broken off its relationship with her last December. So, listen, I don't know that Kathy Griffin hasn't really suffered from encouraging the beheading of Donald Trump. I'm not sure Chrissy Teigen will suffer because of this, because the rules, Democrats don't go to prison and they don't get cancelled unless, they just have different rules, and people like her, they're not like the rest of us, and they have this elitist, gilded existence. So it's sad that she's going to be allowed to keep spreading her fake niceness and real hate, but that's the way of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a bit like Governor Cuomo, who was getting away with apparently being an incredible predator, and it's fine, no bother at all, no bother at all.
Or Governor, Governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam. He can't make up his mind whether he was wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit or blackface.
Unbelievable. Okay, we've come to the recipe time, so get ready for a great recipe. As we said at the beginning of the program, this is very anti-keto, like the exact anti-keto recipe. So how do we start this film? Basically, very super simple. So this is one of the most famous recipes from the New York Times, and it's from Mark Bittman, and he got it from somebody else. And I'm not going to get into the whole etymology of where this thing came from, but it's come down through a number of iterations. I have a version of Mark Bittman's recipe, which I also changed based on the comments from people in the New York Times, which, as I said a few times before.
So this is Anne McElhinney's no-knead bread.
No, it's not really. It's the New York Times, Mark Bittman's no-knead bread, with a couple of additions from people who read the New York Times and write in the comments. Yeah. The big thing about this bread is it needs no kneading, with a K. It needs no special ingredients or equipment or techniques, and it takes very little effort, only time. So you need 24 hours.
I feel like we spent the whole weekend out.
It kind of spoiled the weekend a little. The problem is it's not so much, there's very little work.
Yes.
But there's time that needs to be marked
you have to wait
in the calendar.
18 hours. But I suppose we didn't do it right. We should have done it, and we did it overnight.
We did pretty good now.
Yeah.
You need 24 hours to create the bread. So if you were planning to have it like for a dinner party or whatever, you'd start the night before. before. You'd start the day before, of course. So here's what you need. You need 3.5 cups of flour, but I think it's better to weigh the flour to be sure. So we weighed it out. You can see us there on the patio, weighing it out, because I even had a weighing scale. Very happy about that. 430 grams of all-purpose bread flour, plus more for dusting. A generous...
All-purpose or bread flour?
Yeah.
Yes.
Generous 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. Very important, guys. Make sure you get the instant yeast, not any other kind.
Or 1 gram.
And then 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. You'll see what I did. You can see me doing it. I just used a little bit less than a full tablespoon. Just a little bit less than that. So in a large bowl, you're going to combine the flour, yeast, and salt. Then you're going to add the water. This is 1.5 cups of water. And then stir using a, I'm just using like a stirring thing there, like a what do you call that? A stirring item.
A wooden spoon.
It's not a wooden spoon, actually. I didn't use a wooden spoon. But anyway, stir that until it blends. It won't be that difficult. And it'll be, it'll be shaggy and sticky. Looks kind of weird, but just don't worry about that. When you bring it all together, when you've got all of the flour incorporated, cover the bowl with plastic wrap. And then this is your first thing then. Now you've got 12 hours free, right? So then leave that. We put it into kind of the warmest room in the house, because you want to have it in a room at around 70 degrees temperature, and just leave it. And by the way, you can go and look at it, by the way, because it's very exciting and you're kind of wondering what's going to happen. Next day, you look at it, you'll see these little bubbles on the surface. That's how you know it's ready. See those little bubbles like that? So then you want to put lightly flour a work surface and put the dough onto that. Sprinkle with a little more flour on the top, and then just fold it in on itself once or twice. I think I might have done it 3 times. You see that? Just gentle. Then you want to cover that loosely with plastic wrap and let that rest for 15 minutes. So then you go off, do whatever you want to do for 15 minutes. Alexa's very useful for this. And then what I've done, and this is a thing that came through from the New York Times, people writing on the New York Times, and this is a genius thing. Get yourself a nice big length of parchment paper. Drop your dough into the middle of that parchment paper.
Correct.
And cover that with a
cloth.
towel or cloth, whatever, and leave that for 2 hours. An hour and a half later.
No, but in those 2 hours, the dough should...
The dough is going to double again at that point, apparently. I'm not sure ours doubled.
I don't think ours doubled, but it
did nice.
But it did grow.
The really important thing is then 1.5 hours into that rising, 1.5 hours into that, turn the oven on and put it to 450.
Yeah.
And you need that half hour for that oven to really, really heat up.
The oven needs to be preheated.
You really do.
And you need the Dutch oven to be in there.
And then the Dutch oven goes into that. Put your Dutch oven in there to heat. Phelim's right. Put the Dutch oven in there so it gets really hot. And one thing to know about the Dutch oven, and you'll see I have photographs of that as well. Normal Dutch ovens have basically a kind of a composite lid thing made of like sort of plastic. If that goes into a 450, it'll melt or it'll crack.
Yeah.
I realized I'm going to need a metal knob for that 𝙬𝙬𝙀.
Yeah.
Looked on Amazon, found it for like $4.50. Ordered it came the next day. So you see how I replaced that other knob. Let that heat at 450. So then when the 2 hours comes up, when you come up to the 2 hours, the great thing here is, because you really don't want to burn yourself, is you're going to use the parchment paper, lower down, you see us doing that, lower it down into this mad hot Dutch oven. Put it into the oven with the lid on for half an hour, right? Alexa, set alarm for 30 minutes.
30 minutes, starting now.
For a half an hour. After a half an hour, wow. Take the lid off. Oh my god, look at the colour. Look what it looks like already. I couldn't get over how nice it looked. Look at how beautiful it looks. You got that lid off, and that's only after half an hour. Take that lid off, put it back in the oven, and with our oven, it took another 15 minutes. Your oven, it might take the whole 30. So you can do between 15 and 20 minutes, or 30 minutes more. And then take it out, and you see how easily it comes off the parchment paper. It's all done.
And don't touch. Be very careful with touching the Dutch oven. It is
mad hot. Now, if you are, if you have, if you're very zen, if you've got great powers of, if you're being very good and disciplined, if you're very self-disciplined, you could probably wait for it to cool a little bit. Not us. We immediately knifed into that thing.
Yes, be very careful with the knife.
And I'm going to get to the knife thing right now. And basically, we just had it with butter. It was unbelievable. I'm just going to read a couple of messages from the New York Times. And here's what somebody said, which I just think, this is why I love the New York Times, for just the food. Here's one. Clara wrote to the New York Times 7 months ago. Dear self, this is your future self. I am writing to warn you that next April, you are going to cut your index finger with a bread knife while attempting to cut through your freshly baked loaf. Even though you were being careful, you didn't account for the possibility of the knife slipping sideways on the extra thick and delicious crust. Please take care. Yours truly, you.
Yeah. So basically, it's a hard crust, and your knife could slip. So just be sure and push your bread knife well in and before you start sewing.
But I cannot tell you, and there's loads of other really fun things actually there. I'm not going to go read them right now. And I think what can happen is once you get better at this, you can start adding things. And I think I will add some stuff. I'm thinking of adding cheese. I'm thinking of adding jalapenos the next time. But can I just say, it's gorgeous. It is a really successful, it's a brilliant recipe. Don't try and cut corners. And then I just wanted to give a shout out, by the way, to Cheryl Mead. Thanks a million, Cheryl, for writing. She made a variation of my frittata. Here's what she said. I used bacon, eggs, and jalapeno to give it a little kick like we do here. And there's a picture, by the way. There's a picture of Cheryl's frittata. Looks like our frittata, by the way. But look at what Cheryl did, you know. She just changed a few things. Instead of parsley, she used cilantro. And she also used spinach. We hate spinach. I just can't do it. I also used tomato and potato. And of course, the all-important cheddar cheese. We use Gruyere. But you know what? We also use goat cheese and we use cheddar. The tomato and jalapeno and cilantro was grown right here in my very own garden. Show off. Good for you. The tomatoes are super sweet, 100 variety. So they are very tiny.
Lovely.
They're very small little berries, but they are tomatoes. They worked great. They popped in the skillet. But they are very delicious in the recipe. Were grown, not was grown. I'm typing like a hillbilly. Were grown, that was autocorrect. Doing that mistake. I hate autocorrect sometimes. I use milk too. And then the last thing was, one other thing I want to say is Eminem wrote to us on YouTube and said that she had, after she watched us last week, she had been thinking of getting a new dinner set. And she said, I've been thinking of getting a new everyday dish and dinner set. We already have a more formal set for holidays and special occasions. I'd love to see photos of your new set. Hint, hint.
Oh, so this is the new set. Because we ordered a new set of 𝙤𝙤𝙤 𝙃𝙪𝙤 that was 38% reduced, and they arrived, 2 plates were smashed, and Bloomingdale's sent the whole order again. By the way, they implied they were sending the whole order of the 𝙤𝙤𝙤 𝙃𝙪𝙤 dinner set and the glasses that we ordered as well.
The
glasses have not arrived yet, so we will keep you updated if that comes.
But M&M, there's some photographs of the new dinner set that we have. So yes. We do think it's fabulous and we're very excited. So that's us for this week. Right. I know it kind of feel like it went on a while, but thank you for all the comments, and please, we do encourage you, if you can at all, please go on the podcast app and give us a 5-star rating and give us a comment and keep writing. We love you, and thanks for being here. And don't forget to support mysonhunter.com. We need to get this movie made, and we need to get it made now.
Thank you. Bye.